This is a story of one of medieval Europe's most vicious psychopaths. A story that is as unbelievable as it is gruesome. A story of a demon fighting alongside a saint. A story of a fall so deep that has been questioned time and time again. It's a story that hasn't been told very often, and for a very good reason. This is a story of Gilles de Rais. The year is 1429. The 100 Years' War has been raging for 90 years. Whole generations of Europeans have lived and died in the shadow of this terrible conflict, a struggle that began with English claims to the French throne. Successful English invasions have eaten deep into French territory. That is, until a 16-year-old peasant girl with claims of holy visions convinced the desperate French king to entrust her with the command of the army. It was complete lunacy. But it worked. Against all odds, the virgin girl from Domremy rallied the morale of the troops and scored a number of miraculous victories against the English invaders. But Joan wasn't fighting alone. Fighting alongside her was a dashing young knight, a commander from Anjou who was the talk of the court. The young duke's name was Gilles de Rais, and he helped Joan achieve one of her greatest victories, lifting the siege of Orléans. In 1431, Joan was captured by her enemies and burned at the stake. A couple of centuries later, she would be officially canonized as a saint. Joan might have been killed, but she managed to turn the tide of war. The English were beaten back, and Gilles was at the forefront of the assault. For his valiant efforts in combat, he was bestowed with the highest military honor there was. He became the Marshal of France. It was to be the pinnacle of his career, his moment in the sun. He was his country's favorite son. It didn't stay that way for long. In the second part of 1430s, something odd began happening in the countryside of Vendée in western France. Young peasant children, predominantly boys, were vanishing at an alarming rate. The kids would usually be playing in the forest or picking berries. Sometimes they would inform their parents that they're going to go look for food. In any case, their parents would never see them again. The number of disappearances began rising, fast. A dozen became 50. 50 became 100. By 1440, the number was as high as 600 missing children. By that time, Gilles was retired from military service for almost a decade. His days of glory were long gone. Not only that, but his incredibly expensive taste led him to financial ruin. His spending habits were so out of control that his relatives successfully appealed to the French king, who forbade him to sell any more family property to alleviate his debts. The spiral didn't end there. In May of 1440, amidst a petty financial dispute, Gilles kidnapped a well-known local priest. It proved to be a costly mistake. When released, the priest quickly hurried to his superior, the Bishop of Nantes. He insisted there was something profoundly wrong at the Duke's residence, the eerie Château Tiffauges. To the naked eye, Gilles was just another eccentric nobleman, a spendthrift and a goofball surrounded by a bunch of odd characters. But there was another layer to the man. Alarmed by the priest's claims, the bishop ordered an investigation. His men stormed the castle. Nothing would prepare them for what they found there. Gilles and his 2 bodyguards were arrested immediately. The horrifying truth spilled out. Back in 1432, when Gilles first started to run out of money, he became fascinated by the promises of alchemy. He began looking for the easy way out, and for someone who would show him how to do that. Soon, he would find just the man for the job. François Prelati was a roaming Italian priest who was a renowned master of black magic. As such, he was welcomed with open arms in Gilles' court. François claimed to have direct contact with a powerful demon from hell named Baron. The demon could be summoned in the castle's dungeons, and if he appeared, he would grant the summoner any wish that was burning in his heart. The priest was in possession of a powerful spellbook written with human blood. However, after 3 unsuccessful tries, the dark priest revealed that the demon was angry. He was withholding his presence because the offerings were so meager. There was now only one way to appease him. The cost would be high, but success guaranteed. They needed the ultimate sacrifice, the lives of innocent children. Gilles, increasingly desperate, agreed. His trusted minions, Poitou and Henriet, went to work. Since peasant children begging for scraps around the castle was a regular occurrence, they started there. Young boys were lured into the castle, dressed in nice clothes, spoiled and fed at Gilles' own opulent table. Then they were killed and mutilated. Their remains used in a black mass ceremony, led by the priest in the castle's dark underbelly. Later in court, Gilles' accomplices would testify that he had developed a gruesome habit of sitting on his victims' chests, laughing at them as life slowly drained from their eyes. Despite the ultimate sacrifice, the demon was still nowhere to be found. Gilles began descending into paranoia and then outright madness. Instead of stopping, he ramped up. Killing that first began as means to an end became a predatorial addiction. The number of disappearances climbed fast. Hundreds of bodies were disposed of in the dungeons. If he hadn't been stopped, he would have simply kept going on forever. He was beyond redemption now. Once arrested, he was presented with a mountain of incriminating evidence: bloodied knives, torture devices, dark altars. Gilles and his accomplices had no choice but to confess. Their detailed accounts of killings were so vile that they were immediately struck from the court's records. The 3 defendants, Gilles and his 2 bodyguards, were condemned to death and slated for execution the next day. Gilles asked to go first. He made an impassioned confession before the crowd, asking for forgiveness and hoping for salvation. Then he was hanged. His trusted 2 valets, Poitou and Henriet, were burned at the stake. But not everyone would meet their fate that day. François Prelati, the dark priest that started it all, mysteriously slipped out of jail in the darkness of the night. As time went on, whispers of a massive conspiracy began circulating. Some people claimed that Gilles was set up, that the whole thing was a ploy, that his deteriorating mental state was exploited to get a hold of his properties. It was no secret that Jean V, the Duke of Brittany, coveted Gilles' lands for years. With Gilles out of the way, they would pass into his greedy hands. He formed an alliance with the Bishop of Nantes, a known enemy of Gilles, who was trying to get rid of him and his loud, outspoken heresies. However, the evidence of his mad depravity was overwhelming. Hundreds of grieving peasants testified to their kids' disappearances. Complaints were filed years before he was convicted. Gilles' castle was turned into a killing factory. Gilles confessed even without being tortured. In modern times, a clearer picture would emerge. It wasn't a pretty one. The Duke of Brittany, the Bishop of Nantes, and many other nobles were perfectly aware of what Gilles was up to. They had been spying on him for years. But the lives of peasant children meant nothing to them. They were simply waiting for the right time to strike. For them, this wasn't about justice, it was about gold. When Gilles finally kidnapped an important local priest, they got the green light they were waiting for. Gilles was a serial killer, a bloodthirsty madman obsessed with the devil. But for men even more powerful than him, he was just a pawn. The unholy fall of the man who was once a marshal, an official protector of France, a companion in arms of a virgin saint, was so shocking that it became a horror folktale that has been passed down for generations. But that is a story for another time. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Unfortunately, there's a lot more where this came from, but I can't do it without your support. Thank you.